I'm Nicola Talent, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. So, Eamon, this story starts really with a fairly innocuous house in Youghal in County Cork, worth 100,000 or thereabouts. Not much really for the Irish housing market. But the owner of it is a guy called Thomas Humphreys. He's the subject of a Criminal Assets Bureau case. And as a result of that, it sort of opened up his world, the criminal caliber he's had, how he's been able to remain pretty much under the radar for most of his 37 years, and the massive connections he has deep into organised crime.
Yeah, it's one of those, I suppose it was a thread that someone pulled and it just kept getting longer and longer. Obviously, he was known to, I suppose, certain guards in North Cork and some parts of Kerry as well. I think he's UK born. He married a member of the O'Brien family in Killarney, some of whose members are basically professional criminals involved in home repair scams and deception, that sort of thing.
Was that the story with the really fancy house?
They would be connected. They'll be certainly, if they're not direct relatives, they're involved in the same, I suppose, criminal activity, which is, knocking on people's doors, offering to do roofing and home repairs, and then escalating costs and so on. But they'll also, as we find out in this case, they'll also kind of persuade people that they love them and get them to hand over money. And they were involved in a very cruel romance fraud, which came up in this case as well.
So Thomas Humphreys, anyway, he comes to the UK and he marries into the O'Brien family. How long is he living in around Kerry, Cork?
Well, we know when he was 19, he was done for an armed robbery in sorry, I forget the name of the actual village. I think it was Headford in County Kerry.
Yeah.
And there was another two young men that were done for that as well. He was suspected of another one as well. This is all in the belief evidence again that was given in the Criminal Assets Bureau case in December about him. And they also said, for during those years, right up until about 2019, from 2010 to 2019, he was also connected with people who were involved in the drugs business at what they described as being at a very high level. And one of those associates that was named was Morris O'Shea Salazar, who we have done, plenty of coverage about. This is the Irish Mexican Sinaloa Cartel figure who's considered to be a very high-ranking member. So
that little thread of information we haven't known of Humphreys before this. So what his connection with him is, what it does show us is that O'Shea Salazar was likely in Ireland until 2019, which is the point in which their connection severs, basically. Salazar, of course, was his mother, Yolanda Salazar, is currently in jail in Chile. He is wanted. He's been caught up in the EncroChat investigation. He comes to Ireland as a sort of 10-year-old child after his father, allegedly Irish and from Killorglin, is killed in Mexico. He grows up here and he has essentially been identified in intelligence files as the head of the Sinaloa Cartel in Europe. And because he was based in Killorglin, we know that there's been this huge story over the past few years when an enormous amount of crystal meth was caught on its way to Cork Port for shipment out to Australia. A number of people have been caught up in that plot to get the components into Australia from Ireland, a place where really the Australians aren't going to search the product too much that's been shipped. It was a clever thing to do.
Yeah,
Nathan MacDonald, the garden centre owner, is currently serving 12 years in prison for his role in it. And James Lean's trial is due before the Special Criminal Court this year. But Humphreys is definitely a named associate within the cab files of Salazar.
Yeah, and and it's like, if you remember the stuff that came out in the Spanish press, that it was like these guys were associates in Kerry in 2019, and in 2020 Salazar was in an apartment in Barcelona and directing the activities of the gang. So now it was also...
And his EncroChat files show that he was there, but he also had a lot of contacts in a lot of ports. I was surprised the amount of ports that were being named across Europe, where he was able to bring in cocaine because he had bribed port workers, or so he had said on the EncroChat material.
And around the same time, while he had gone to Barcelona, Humphreys had gone to Australia, along with his brother-in-law. So you had O'Brien as Pizza Face is his nickname. And
tell us about the brother-in-law. He's the one involved in the romance.
Yeah, they went to, around this time, they went to Australia because Pizza Face was basically dodging a prosecution that was going to happen, where he'd been accused of deceiving
what a nickname.
A woman. Well,
what a nickname.
I wonder how he got it, but anyway. But so he'd been accused of deceiving this woman out of €260,000, and it seems to have been particularly cruel. Like, it was referred to in court as...
Was she Irish?
She's an Irish woman. She was 57 when she passed away in 2021. But in the years before that, and it would have been up to, I think, about 2017 was when it kind of came to an end, he had persuaded her. You know, he knocked on her door one day, offering to fix her bay window, and struck up a relationship and asked her out for a date, and turned up with a bottle of wine, and she started dating him. And she knew him as a completely different name, that he was,
not
a builder. No, not at all, and not O'Brien.
Been very alluring.
A completely different name. This is businessman from Skibbereen. And they were kind of getting on reasonably fine until he sold her Volkswagen car, because she had left the logbook in it, and he had told her that he was sold it because he was going to, upgrade her car, but that never happened, and the relationship broke up. He turned up then a couple of years later and told her that she was the love of his life, and she kind of, fell for him again. He'd come up with various stories about, he now had a solar panel business in Belgium, and he was going to sell it off, but he had some tax bills to pay, and she'd lent him some money, and sometimes she'd say no, and sometimes she'd say yes. They went to the Texas Steakhouse in Limerick and for one day for lunch, and he showed her this, basically was a fake letter purporting to be from a solicitor to show that he had half of the money ready to buy a house. They were going to go in halves together, in this house. And he basically left her high and dry. He milked her of all her life savings. And when she kind of finally went to the guards, he disappeared to Australia, as it happened.
With Humphreys.
Humphreys, and joined him there as well. But this particular lady, the case was going through to Limerick Circuit Court, and O'Brien would have been facing a prosecution for this. But she passed away. She died of a heart attack, and it was kind of, I suppose, there was one piece of the affidavit from one of the guards who actually investigated this, and this is again part of all the belief evidence about how these guys are involved in criminality. And he described it. He said, look, it was very clear to see the particularly despicable deception that Patrick O'Brien had inflicted on her, and it had a severe impact. She often discussed this openly with me. She felt deeply hurt by Patrick O'Brien and ashamed of being the victim of such a deception. The fraud caused her a massive financial loss. It meant that she apply for a new mortgage and start again. While she always tried to be philosophical about what happened and try to move on with her life, it was clear to me the ordeal had caused her a lot of stress. So, I mean, for guards to write something, fairly emotive like that, kind of really,
very
I suppose,
unusual.
the depth of, the criminal depravity that somebody could, over an extended period of time, over a couple of years, to pretend you're in a relationship with someone when you're married to someone else. You're always using a fake name. I mean, some people would say, oh, well, she was stupid about it and she deserved what she got, and there are some comments on social media suggesting that, believe it or not. But it's just a nasty crime, and then they went to, Pizza Face himself.
And all the while, the group around them and the associates around them are clearly making 10 times that money, surely, through drugs?
Well, we certainly know Salazar was at a different level, at this time, but look, that's the evidence they have about their criminal activity. We do know that they were linked. There was no evidence that they continued to have that link beyond 2019.
Yeah.
But there they are in Australia, and they're doing their deception stuff again. I mean, O'Brien was done for tricking homeowners out of nearly $1 million Australian dollars, and he got a 5-year sentence. He got a decent sentence in Australia for that.
And did they go after that money there?
And they went to look for it, but it was gone. It was never found.
Yeah.
And our guy Humphreys, the target of CAB, he was also separately done for deceiving somebody out of 100,000, and he was actually arrested just as he was about to board a flight,
Right.
and he got bail and went on the run. So he's actually on the run from Australia, who tried him in absentia, and basically he's wanted in Australia. He's, according to the CAB evidence in December, they believe him to be living in the UK. Now he did defend, like there was a counsel representing him in court, who I suppose tried to put the argument that, in terms of his actual criminality, described it as petty crime, which I think...
This is to defend the Criminal Assets Bureau case.
This is the contested,
are looking for this house in Youghal worth 100,000.
Yeah.
And jet-setting Humphreys has been all over the world. His links to the Sinaloa Cartel, is currently believed to be living in England, wanted in Australia.
Yeah.
But he still manages to contest the case because he wants to keep his 100 grand home in Youghal.
Well, it's been contested, yeah, as you're allowed to do.
Yeah.
So
no, you're allowed.
And his counsel, I suppose, being the professionals that they are, was making the point that in terms of his actual convictions in this country, it's a petty crime. Now, the CAB counsel said, the defence actually ignored the facts of the case, is the way it was put.
Yes, because I was going to ask, whatever about your convictions, have they actually put forward a defence on how he could have afforded the 100 grand Youghal home in the first place?
Well, we didn't actually hear a whole lot. Now, he does have another house in Kanturk, which was a gift from a sister at one point. Now, it was a very cheap house again. It was like less than 20,000. And that wasn't part of the CAB case. So there is legitimate money there, or, that he got from, fair means, through either family members or from whatever, I suppose, some deals that may have been done. But again, they were saying there was a direct link between the romance fraud, that the money that Pizza O'Brien had taken from this woman in County Limerick, there was a direct link between some of those funds and the money that was used then to buy this house, albeit for a small amount of money. But they were able to, they were able to identify the chain of transactions that linked it. So it was a very specific kind of proceeds of criminal assets that were used to buy this house. So that was the argument they're making, which Judge Liam Kennedy, reserved his judgment. So he's going to come back on that and presumably produce a judgment at a later date on that.
And look, what an interesting story. There sounds like there's loads and loads of layers to this. No doubt we'll come back to it. Thanks, Eamon.
Always a pleasure, Nicola.